open it up with some statistics and information, or someone can ask the first question and we'll take it from a conversation. Oh, yes.
Praise the Lord, everybody.
Praise the Lord.
Okay. My question, because I'm a little of age, y'all can tell.
That's all right, baby.
Younger ladies, because I didn't, growing up, I found myself in a domestic situation at the young age of 16. And I didn't know because I was listening to my friends and, you know, it was new to me, so I was fearful. But just a question, as any woman, even a young lady, abuse wasn't around me. Sometimes it does be around young ladies, and they tend to feed off of that. But my question is, what is the signs of abusive relationship? Because sometimes we just think verbal is not an abuse. We just think it's all about the physical.
Right.
And I mean, I'm glad that one of the panels is here because it is in ministry, and it's more so with sex, because it may not, to us, it may not be considered rape because that's your boyfriend or your husband. Right. But if you say no. So just to help someone out that's here today in those areas, how can you identify if it's a domestic abuse as far as the things I point out, sex, verbal, and physical?
Thank you. Great question. And you touched on every single category of So thank you for opening it up that way. And I do want to...
Listening to your friends, because sometimes they will give you bad advice.
Oh, yes. Absolutely. So let's talk about teens. Let's start from teenage, from adolescence. So mid-adolescence, about 14 to 17, until late adolescence, about 18 to 21. So at that early stage, it's referenced as teen dating violence. And believe it or not, about 16 million women and 11 million men in adulthood reported having experienced teen dating violence in their adolescence.
Wow.
When we're young, especially as young women, we are taught that he hit you because he liked you. When your 7-year-old daughter comes home and says, "Oh, Johnny poked me, Johnny pushed me. Oh, it's okay, honey. Johnny just likes you. He doesn't know how to express it." So that seed, that inception happens very young. And then the way that it is fed and fostered is we see images on television that continue to perpetuate that idea that women have to be and like to be manhandled in order to be shown love, right? So if that's starting from young, we're also being taught, well, he really loves me, that's why he's jealous, right?
True.
So he calls me 5 times a day at 16 and we smile. My boyfriend likes me a lot. He just wants to know where I am because he really, really likes me, right? Sharing location, where were you, what are you doing, right? But remember, if it was incepted at 7 years old, now at 16, it's continued to grow. So what happens now at 19, 21, 35, we've also had the inception of low self-esteem and a low self-worth, right? So now our identity has been shaped in this idea that the only way to be shown love is for abuse. And so, speaking of women that have witnessed it in their household, witnessed it in friends' homes, right? It becomes this everyday experience. Like, oh, well, that's normal. If he's not hitting you, he's not loving you correctly. And so some of the warning signs, we know, first let's just define intimate partner. So domestic violence is the covering. Domestic violence can be for anyone in the household. Right. So it can be a parent hitting a child hitting a parent, siblings hitting siblings, that's domestic violence. When we talk about intimate partner violence, it is 2 people that are currently or in the past had an intimate relationship. So that's what we're referencing when it comes to intimate partner violence. And it can take forms in physical violence, sexual violence, emotional stalking, psychological aggression, technological abuse, right? We are in a different day and age now, and there's a such thing as revenge porn, having images placed on the internet about you. That's also a way of controlling, financial control, not allowing you to work or keep an account for every dime that you have. The stalking, needing to know you're everywhere, about following you around. Now, when we talk about emotional and psychological and verbal abuse, those are often a little more difficult for us to recognize because we've also been customized to believe that abuse is just physical. Oh, it's not really abuse, he just called you a name, he didn't punch you, so it's okay, right? I also work in child welfare, and so having people to understand that while this parent maybe not have punched their child in the eye, they were still emotionally and psychologically abusive to their child, which means it's incorrect, right? So one thing I do want to point out is before we looked at the stages of abuse. This is what it was looked at as 4 stages. So you had tension building, right? There's something building, brewing, you know, okay, it's not, he's getting a little upset, things aren't really going right. Then we have an incident. That's the abusive incident. Then after that, there's a calm. In that calm, it's, honey, I love you. I didn't mean to. I'm sorry. You made me do this. If you didn't do that, then I wouldn't do that. Then it goes to reconciliation, right? This calm and reconciliation was often looked at as the honeymoon phase. And so many would say, well, why is she staying if she's going to just do it again? So the term a battered woman came about in the 1970s. Prior to that, if a woman caused any harm or murdered her husband and claimed it's because she was being beat, it didn't have any validity. In the 1970s, it began to have some validity because there were real psychological, emotional, and physical impacts of abuse. And so these were the stages. It's not relevant to every single woman, but just to give an idea of if I believe that one day he's going to get back to the calm, then I'll endure this because we will get back to that healthy phase.
True.
When we talk about abuse, anyone familiar with power and control wheel?
Yes.
So with the power and control wheel, let's have a real conversation about this. This is recognizing the signs of abuse. So on the outside is physical violence and sexual violence. On the inside, there are different tactics. Using coercion and threats, using intimidation, using emotional abuse, using isolation, minimizing, denying, and blaming, using children, using male privilege, using economic abuse, and then by using these tactics fostered around physical and sexual violence, that's where the perpetrator, the person causing harm, gains control. So all of the tactics I named in the middle, that can be present in any type of abusive relationship. So whether it's emotional, psychological, those tactics are present as a means to control. When you add in physical, the threat of physical violence and the threat of sexual violence, that's how those tactics change. So I was watching a video earlier that said, if a husband comes home and says, I'm using the terminology husband, but again, it can be intimate partner, it does not have to be between married individuals. If a husband comes home and says, I'm not cleaning for the rest of the month, now you might get into an argument, right? It's gonna cause some tension. But if an abusive husband comes home and says, I'm not cleaning for the rest of the month, an abused woman has to really contemplate, how do I respond to that? Is this the setup for an abusive moment, right? Am I going to be harmed? So now I have to do everything that he says, because in the possible threat of violence, because she knows what he's capable of, he's also now using intimidation, right? There's intimidation. I'm not doing anything. So if she's being intimidated and she's been abused by him before, the tactics are more successful to gain for him power and control. I want to talk about emotional abuse, and then Minister Tiffany, tell me how, do I keep going? Do you want to say each person? So, oftentimes it doesn't start at physical abuse. How many of us would agree?
It starts with the emotional.
It does not start with the physical. it does not often start with the punch to the face. Why? Because they don't know what your possible response will be.
Right.
I know someone that recently said, right, you might fight back. They don't know. They don't know. Right? That's what we hope to God. First of all, we hope to never be in that situation, right? But we also hope that would be our reply.
Right.
But a woman that has been emotional abuse, putting her down, making her feel bad about herself, calling her names, making her think she's crazy, playing mind games, humiliating her, making her feel guilty, isolating her, controlling what she does, who she sees, who she talks to, what she reads, where she goes, how she spends her money. Minimizing, denying, and blaming her for everything. If her self-esteem has been beat so much, I know someone, an adult male, 50-something years old, that gave advice to a 30-something-year-old man and said, the way to control women is to beat them down into submission. Right? So there's this twisted view on submission to a man. So yes, does the Bible say submit unto your husband one to another? Right? It's right. I had to add that back in there. You saw that, right? It was something about one to another, right? We don't want to talk about that part though. That's a whole other conversation. One to another. So, but his advice was, if you beat her down to the point that she needs you, you have her.
She had no choice.
So now you beat her down where she feels guilty for everything. She feels insignificant. Her identity is wrapped in you. Then the physical is behind the corner. And chances are you're staying. Because again, if I have no self-worth, then, well, maybe I did deserve that. And we also want to be clear, leaving an abusive relationship, it takes up to 7 times for a woman to leave before she escapes successfully. And oftentimes she is murdered before she leaves. And so let's talk about that statistic. So about 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men report having experienced severe physical violence from an intimate partner in their lifetime. About 1 in 5 and 1 in 13 men have experienced sexual violence. When the data from the U.S. crime government suggests that 1 in 5 homicide victims are killed by an intimate partner. 1 in 5. The reports also found that over half of female homicide victims in the United States are killed by a current or former male intimate partner. So when we say, well, why don't you just leave? It's not that simple, right? So, well, again, I work in child welfare, and we have a lot of cases that come in where a woman is being abused, and in order for her to keep her children, that was another thing. So one of the things in here is using the children. Now, if I complain and he says I'm crazy, they might give him my children. So to protect my children, I'll stay in this situation. And what we tell the mothers is they now have to possibly go into a domestic violence shelter. What that means is leaving your home, leaving your sense of community, your children leaving their school, leaving family, all types of contact that keep you grounded is now lost. Wow. You're going into the shelter, you have to change your job because chances are he knows where you work. You cannot tell family where you are.